Good morning and welcome to a podcast in the series of meeting wonderful people who have decided in their life to make a change where they are serving other people for the greater good and the greater good of the world. I'm delighted to invite Monica this morning to be with us. And I've been looking forward to having and holding this podcast with her for several weeks. So I'm very excited and I'm looking forward to exploring lots of different things with her. And I think I'm going to call this podcast Looking Left and Right, and that will become more apparent as we discuss and go forward with our podcast. It's definitely going to be explorative. I will hope there are many, many things people can learn and take away from this podcast. And we are very aware of all the listeners that will be receiving this. This is why we are here. I am Julie Jackson. At the moment, I'm in Montenegro. And I am co-founder of Reflex Now, where this will be posted on Substack, co-founder of my own YouTube channel, and also co-founder of Reflexive Education, a website with educational facilities and services online currently. And going forward, I look forward to creating many more podcasts and having many more guests who are an inspiration to us all in a variety of ways. And I will hand over to Monica to introduce herself to us this morning.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here with you, Julie. Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure.
Yes, I'm Monica. I'm a writer and community builder with the Oneness project, which is an invitation to come closer and understand the depth of loneliness as a personal but also collective experience, and how that path of understanding might help us to reconnect with ourselves and each other and the world. So I write about it and try to raise awareness on this topic, but then also I host experiences and bring people together in shared spaces to explore together.
And I know from past experience, you've produced TED Talks as well about it. So we can find you there too, everywhere. It's true. So within this awareness that we have of being here for the good of other people and sharing with other people, we're aware that it's important that when people listen to this, they think of others that they might like to share it with. There are lots of ways this can be shared with. My business partner has developed an app that can be used called Scale, but there are lots of other ways. And it's just important that whilst we're aware of what we're listening to and we take on board those ideas, we can pop into our heads friends or family members or work colleagues that we think, oh, this could really speak to them right now. And I think we live in a world where it's ever more important that we share that with other people in a very beautiful way. So on to our first question, which is about the sharing forwards idea. And I'd like to ask you this morning, what would you like to share forwards with others? And why would you particularly choose that today?
Yes, I think I would like to share forward the idea to keep looking left and right, as in looking towards others who are around us. And by that, I mean, not even just people, but maybe also other living beings, like even extending that to the idea of trees and the sun and the plants and the beings and the bees all around us. I feel like we're living more and more in a world where it has become quite overwhelming to hold everything that is happening around us and being constantly stimulated with news and images and sufferings and the crises in the world. The tendency then is to, make your own world kind of smaller and perhaps withdraw in some moments, which I'm not saying is a wrong thing. Sometimes it is exactly what we need to do when it becomes really too much. So it's a delicate dance in a way. However, I do think that it is still important that we, wherever we are physically and locally, that we don't shut ourselves off and that we keep that connection to everything and everyone around us. So keep looking left and right and forward and backwards. Yeah,
I mean, it's such a true point that you make there. I think often we can get distracted and we can get so busy, and with technology we get almost like overstimulated, saturated with things that can take our energy and our focus and attention. And it's just so good for our well-being of our mental state, as you're suggesting, to, I almost call it like stepping back. You haven't really called it that, but for me, it's like a stepping back, a breathing, and being aware of what's around us.
Yes, right. Being present, really, and also noticing what's happening, really. Right.
Yes.
It's kind of like, okay, there are good people. Like, people are good, around us. Like, people are, and people are, all of these people are going through life and doing their best in a way, and you'll be able to see the humanity that is, yes, still here as well, despite, I think the often overwhelmingly negative perception of the world and everything. So I think that's the important thing, to ground yourself again in the reality that is around you, that it's like the actual people, the actual world, the actual things that are also happening, not just what's happening online.
Yeah, it's almost that naturally emerging goodness in nature, like you've said, with animals and insects, but also in people. And sometimes we not even consciously, we overlook that. We don't put enough focus on that. And as you said, suggesting, a lot of social media and a lot of news is focused on the suffering or the dreadful things that happen. And sometimes people these days are getting overwhelmed with that as well, and not sure how to almost take themselves out of it, or to deal with it, and to deal with every life. So I love what you said about the realness of it, the realness of what's around you, and that sort of liveness of it, give you that grounding, is so important. I'm sure many listeners will recognize that and think, gosh, yes, when was the last time I looked at a tree, or just sat and noticed that insect, or even noticed the person in the shop who held the door open for me, or whatever it might be. And all these little things, seemingly little things, are really, really important to nourish us, I think. So how do we look left and right? What can that be for us? I love that phrase and I love that idea, but how will our listeners kind of do it? What would it involve?
I think the first thing is to not be so much on your phone or distracted in a way, like to take maybe a conscious decision. And I don't mean for the whole day, but just a moment when, for example, you go out to get groceries or go to a coffee shop, or you're walking and you're outside, you're leaving your house, not to, and I do this all the time, right? So this is also a message to myself, not to then respond to that text message or send a quick voice note or quickly check up on news or something. Be there, like walk when you walk and put your phone away and see what is around you. Or when you have to wait, just be present to wait. How many emails can I respond to while waiting for the bus or whatever? So there are so many of these moments, and they're just minutes throughout the days. We can decide not to be distracted, decide not to pull out the phone and do the thing that we usually do. Or listen to a podcast even, or other ways of consuming. But just take a moment to be without that and see how that feels, right? And be just with yourself and with everything that is around you. Try to find a moment of quiet and look around. And it'll be interesting to see and observe how many other people are occupied in doing something while you're the one looking around and like, oh, we used to do that. And once you make eye contact with a person, the chances to exchange a smile or just a nice way of looking each other in the eyes and acknowledging each other's presence for a moment, or casually striking up a chat or a conversation, even just one comment about something, even if it's about, if we're kind of pretending to be busy on our phones or whatever, and our bodies say we're not there, right? And like, I'm not here, I'm somewhere else. But if we're open and we are there, we are aware, then we're also able to look, quote unquote, right, left and right and around us. And then we're also being looked at, as in we are also being seen. Which is ultimately also something that we are all longing for. I think that speaks to that loneliness, and the modern loneliness these days. Part of it is that we want to be recognized, right? Just in our ways of being, not to be friends with everybody. It doesn't have to be that depth. That's a different kind of connection. But just the idea of, okay, yes, I'm part of this local community or like this city or this neighborhood, this humanity, you know, like there's a sense of, okay, yes, you know, I'm not alone trying to do everything by myself in my life. There's a way of being in relationship with others. And I think that starts with these really small ways of coming back to ourselves.
I think it's a beautiful thing what you say. I feel it really keenly, and I tend to think, gosh, am I overreacting because of my age or how I've been brought up or my nature? So I love the realness of speaking to people. I don't get much from texting somebody or even reading an email. I can do it and I'll keep in touch, but for me, it lacks something, it lacks that feeling or that real connection. And I've found that increasingly, the more I see someone with a phone in their hand, the more I feel that the shutters just come down.
Yeah.
You know, if you're talking to someone and they get their phone out and they're doing something, it's just like a block about, I mean, physically, like you said, body language, but also they've just gone. And, and I'm kind of set, where are you? How do I get you back? And they might return so many minutes later, but it's kind of an odd, awkward, disjointed, you don't get the same connection again. It feels like they've almost dropped out of that real strong connection. So I feel that. And then something else that struck me recently, and maybe it's because of living in different countries and experiencing that for the first time, that's the eye contact and the opportunities that arise from that can just be tremendous. And as you said, it's not filled with expectation. It's not filled with the criteria that, oh, everybody's going to be my friend or I'm going to see everybody the next day. It's just that you have that meeting, you have that acknowledgement of a few words or even just pointing at something if you don't speak the same language or whatever it might be, that interaction. And then you don't know how that leads to something else. You find out so much more about the culture and the way of life and, you know, and then that can be reciprocal. And there's such an opportunity for growth for people that I find is wonderful. And if we all were able to do that in our own ways, what an amazing way of living for people of the world.
Yes.
So that really, really has spoken to me, what you've said just there. And I really hope it speaks to other people. And I'd love to think that coming away from this, people take that on board and think, how can I do a bit of that today? You know, you don't have to be really confident or have any arrogance. It's just a natural sit with yourself. As you said, be aware of yourself and then just be aware of others and see how that can develop. I think it's just a wonderful thing.
Yeah.
And you mentioned about quiet, and I'm definitely someone that loves quiet at times and feels I need that, perhaps has a belief that people do. So how do you achieve those moments of quiet yourself? And how do you think those moments help other people in their lives?
Yeah, it's a very powerful yet soft rebellion almost in this world of noise and constant stimulation. It's a very loud world, and everything is kind of trying to get your attention, and everything is giving you an illusion of feeling connected, right? Like all of these, what you described with talking or being with a person who, you know, you're having a conversation with, or you're just being with and they're on their phone checking something. Or I mean, how often I see that when couples, friends, families sit together across the table and everybody's on their phone. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you here? Why are we here? Why are we here though? And of course, I'm like extremely sensitive and I see that and I observe it as just one example. But this is sort of the state that we're in terms of constant overstimulation, busyness, and people being genuinely overwhelmed with life, and work is a huge issue, of course, and work culture. So to say something or to propose quietness in this kind of a world and in this kind of a state, I know can sound really challenging and almost impossible. Right? It sounds like, really? Like, how should I fit that into my day? I have so many things. I hear that from people all the time, and I know how that feels because I've also lived that life. In order to, I think, to almost break out of that cycle or kind of this pattern of believing that the more that I do, then maybe I can go faster, I'll be able to achieve more and be more efficient, and then I will have time.
Yeah, almost.
It's like, and then I will be able to go on a vacation and finally breathe and relax. It's kind of this logic,
cycle,
which has been proposed and suggested, of course, by the capitalist systems that we live in, that tell us that this is right. The reward comes later.
Yes, yeah.
But I think it just doesn't add up. I mean, it just doesn't work, and we kind of know this intuitively. So my proposal, I guess, is to say, rather than believing that you have to earn, your quietness or the moment of stillness or a moment of for yourself, you don't have to earn that. You can reclaim it, like own that and make that space for yourself. Don't wait for someone to give you permission to have a moment of stillness and quietness, but take that as a radical act of self-care ultimately, and self-care not as something that you consume or that you have to again buy or earn, in the sense of I worked so hard, so therefore now I can go on a retreat in a few weeks. That's going to be really short term, and even if it's going to be nice during that time, I don't think it's going to be the nourishment on a deeper level that you need, that will ultimately shift something in the way that you want to live. So how can you now start integrating and claiming small moments of quietness and stillness by perhaps making space for 15 minutes a day, 15 minutes, sitting or moving, walking, moment of stillness. Yeah, however that looks like for you, a quietness. And it doesn't have to be literally quietness, right? For some, it might be a moment of listening to their favorite music or painting or drawing, do something creative or something with your hands. I mean, people doing that more and more. So, right, this is a moment of stillness. This is a moment of saying, I'm not doing this to be productive or to be the next arts and crafts master, but I'm doing this because I enjoy it, because it genuinely calms me down in a way of not having to think, about all the to-do list items, that I can just be. So whatever that looks like for you, of course, it might be something more active, right? Sports or anything with the body, I think is usually great. But that can be a moment of quiet, off the phone, off all the external stimulation, and just a conscious decision to say, I'm reclaiming that. This is my space and I want to own it. And I want to enjoy it fully. I want to really savor that and do it in a way that nourishes me.
It's interesting you said the word reclaiming. I think it's like reclaiming your life back. It's reclaiming an element of it that is so important.
Yeah.
And as you said, not to have any guilt associated with it, other values that you have with other things. That there has to be an outcome. There has to be a purpose. It has to feel it's almost got some worth to it.
Yes.
And it doesn't. And I think the other thing you said was about just being, so many people are, would I say, afraid or again feel guilty or don't quite see the point of just being. And yet for us as human beings, that is just so important and so vital to have, as you said, those 15 minutes or however long it might be in your day. And if you're someone that's into sort of statistician or you're someone that's into maths, if you added that up, it's very, very little of your entire existence. So, if you're thinking 15 minutes is too long, well, actually, if you try and see it in the full picture of things, it's not that long at all. But it can have such a wonderful glow within yourself and also such wonderful consequences to it in your life and your state of being.
Yes.
So I think that is, again, a lovely thing to share with other people. And again, I really hope that's something when they listen to this, they think, yeah, I'm going to try that. Let's see how that feels for me and how I can explore that. We mentioned this idea of reconnecting with others. So what would reconnection mean and look like for you? And what kind of words and phrases might our listeners be using or thinking of, perhaps to explore that element for their lives and with others?
I think reconnection for me is reconnecting to something that is already within us. I know this sometimes it can sound a little bit cliche about like everything is already inside you, but literally everything is already here. Everything is already here. We just have to return to something that we have neglected or chosen to hide or not look at. And reconnecting and reconnection, I think, is that return to something that is innately human and natural almost to us, not human, but natural to us and essential in terms of, how we want to move through life and how we want to be in relationship with ourselves, but also others. And I quite like this idea of, coming back, to, and for that, it needs some reflection, I guess, and it needs that being and that quietness and that pause almost, right? Because we keep going, and it's like, okay, and then next week, and then the future, right? Like we're either that or we regret that we haven't done something in the past, and like, but next time I really should do this differently. So it almost needs that pause to stay in the present moment in order to know what you want to reconnect to and know how to reconnect, and reconnecting to that ability and to that capacity ultimately to build more meaningful relationships. And that entails a lot, right? That entails, what are the relationships right now that I have in my life? Am I fulfilled in a way that there is reciprocity, right? There is mutuality, there is depth, there is intimacy, there's a sense of honesty, whatever it is that is important to you in your relationships, right? I think there's common overlap, but maybe for some people, their sense of adventure, a sense of doing new things together is really important versus others who just want stability, a sense of security, a sense of companionship. So it depends on your needs in a way. But I think to become aware of that is kind of the first step into knowing then how you want to reconnect with other people, for example, but then also you could adapt that to yourself and your own being. And then you can also extend it and expand it to reconnecting with a sense of larger belonging in your community, in your world, with nature itself, like wherever you find yourself, with spirituality, like a sense of being part of something greater. So there are different levels, I think, to that of self, other, and world that I like to think of when I think of reconnection.
It doesn't have to be the center, but there's some kind of inner part, which is you, and then there's another circle, which is others, and another circle, which is, as you said, the kind of global connection. And something that struck me when you actually first started speaking about it was, and this probably is quite tricky in many ways to navigate, but should those different layers feel effortless or effortful? And how do we get the balance between those, I suppose, just right in a way? And maybe we don't get them just right, but how can we navigate that?
I think both, right? I would say both, effortless and effortful. I don't think we can move through life with purely effortless. I think that reminds me of the techno-utopian idea of, let's build machines and technology that is so frictionless that it is perfect and flawless, and it's just slick, and there's zero resistance.
And zero variety and
zero variety. Also, for me, then there's where does the growth come from, right? Where does growth come from? And not in the sense of like linear growth, but like growth in terms of richness and depth. If we do not have some obstacles, if we do not have some resistance, if we do not have some friction that we have to move through, I think that's the essence of meaningful relationships ultimately. And at the same time, I recognize that a lot of our culture right now that is being portrayed to us through social media, through movies, through the stories that we tell, those are very much driven by that narrative of it needs to be the perfect partner, friendship, relationship, life, even. You have to become financially independent and also raise an amazing family and also have time for your self-care and also have, be benevolent to host a dinner every week for your community. It's kind of like, yes, what, how? Like, we're not machines. Like, that's so unrealistic. But that ideal is very much placed, I think, in the various dimensions of our relationships, whether it's again personal, romantic, or work, or within the community, that it ought to be effortless. And so people are struggling, as in we are struggling to attain to that standard, and we're like, everything feels like work, everything feels like effort. Why is everybody having such an easy and amazing life?
And the reality of it, two very different things, and the projection of it and the presentation of it. And then she said it gives that bar in society almost that people then feel they have to meet or adhere to, and that's what contentment is. It almost becomes associated with that then, and that is a contented life, and then people try and scrabble to get there.
Which is so counterintuitive and productive ultimately, right? In terms of wanting to actually live a life that is your own. Again, back to the reclaiming of, is that the way that you want to live your life, or and you want to live your relationships in that sense, how you want to be. So coming back to the idea of effortless, and effortful, I think yes, figuring out that balance is a constant, it's not even a challenge, but it's perhaps what is being offered to us, right? It's an invitation to move with that, to say like, yes, okay, that was a little bit too much, or, I was pushing too much towards this and trying to make that relationship happen, or try to get too much out of it, or whatever. And another way is like, oh, wow, there's now so much enjoyment and it feels very light and reciprocal and nourishing. So I think that there's maybe some brief moments where it actually feels in balance. And it almost feels like a perfect, balance of effort and effortless. There's probably usually a way of trying to be somewhere in between, where you're like, yes, it could be maybe a little bit more this and less that. But I think that's what we're ultimately all trying to
experience, maybe.
Experience and be with. It's just kind of like, okay, we're all learning, we're all on and I think if we're more conscious of that process perhaps, and of that state, and knowing that everybody else is trying to do the same thing in their lives and their ways of balancing, I think that can bring some relief perhaps, and also some humility ultimately to wherever you are, and rather than attaining to something that you want to reach, feels like so tiring to reach that.
And would you say, I mean, what I'm thinking about is that is part of the oneness experience, that acceptance, that acknowledgement, that awareness, that navigating, and that's what I see as like a flow, is what you're describing. And it's being willing and, to me, a little bit brave enough, and maybe what you said about almost rebellious in a sense of carving time out to have time to yourself, but also looking at your relationships and thinking about how they shaped, how they formed, what is effortful, what is effortless, what's happening for me here, as well as what's happening for other people as well. So would you say that's part of the oneness experience?
Yeah, I always think of it as the shared sufferings that we have, right? As in the challenges and the difficulties and the problems that we have with moving through life and through our relationships, the challenges that we share that are both individual but also collective. But then also the shared joys and the shared love and the shared care that is also there. So it is the whole spectrum of that. I think becoming aware of that and holding that almost, right, for yourself, and also being more open about this is a big piece on we are actually more interconnected and truly interdependent in our lives, whether that is conscious or not conscious, or more visible or almost less visible.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I used the word celebrate the other day. I felt,
Yeah.
Celebrating
That.
the joy, celebrating the love, celebrating the shared experience, any beautiful. And we take a moment to celebrate that enough.
Yes.
And I feel perhaps we don't. And I don't mean in the kind of praising somebody or even praising ourselves, but just, as you said, holding that space, holding that moment of joy just for a little bit and recognizing what that is and just allowing ourselves to almost enjoy it. And sometimes I wonder, in the world that we live in, we don't almost make that space, and we almost feel that guilt if we do, or we haven't really got time to do that, and why are we doing that? It doesn't serve that. No, it doesn't serve any purpose. That's the whole point. It is just being with others and just feeling that immensity that with other people, and that oneness and that connection. So again, I hope from what people have heard from us today, they're encouraged to embodying that, I think.
Like that.
Yeah. So we haven't really yet so much talked about the loneliness aspect, which is a flip side, isn't it, to the oneness.
Yeah.
So let's venture into that. And how would you advise people to embrace that? We know there are lots of people that are experiencing that for different reasons. And often when you read studies, they say this is going to grow for many reasons in the future. And people struggle with it. So what would you say?
Yes. Yeah. I first want to acknowledge, right, that we have never been more connected in one ways and more disconnected and alone. Many of us feel more alone in this world right now. And that is not our fault. That is no one's fault. And I think this is important to say, because loneliness in particular is such a stigmatized, misunderstood, and shameful experience and feeling. So shame is very closely linked to the experience of loneliness, which makes it not only uncomfortable and hard to bear, but it also makes it really hard to admit and to express and to acknowledge. So there's something that we want to hide, and we want to pretend almost that it doesn't exist. We want to avoid it. And part of the reason why that is because of the systems and, again, the cultural stigma and the cultures really that we've created that say that loneliness, like if you feel lonely, then that is on you. It implies that it is your fault, quote unquote. It's kind of like, why don't you make more effort in connecting with other people? Go
It's your
more out,
choice.
it's your thing. Like, why everybody else seems to be, not lonely. So why are you that one weird person who seems to be lonely? And that's a very harsh, and it's just untrue. It's not a true statement or read of what is actually happening, especially because loneliness itself as an experience comes in so many different nuances and shapes and forms. Every time I bring this up in either one of my gatherings or a different kind of context with people, usually someone will share a moment of loneliness with me. And every time I think to myself that it is so unique, it is so subjective, it is very personal, and that makes it also beautiful in some ways, even though it is painful, yes, but it is such a unique experience on what makes you feel lonely, or when loneliness arises, in what moment. It is completely independent of how socially connected you are, what social class you're in, what culture you're from, or what professional background you're in. Like, it's so universal and personal at the same time. So loneliness comes when you feel sometimes abandoned or neglected, sometimes more like excluded. Sometimes it is simply this idea of not feeling heard or understood or seen, even by the people who are closest to you. Sometimes it is that feeling of lacking meaningful connections or relationships, or having moved to a new place, or, that the idea of, I literally do not know anyone, I feel lonely. But it can also be a loneliness in relationships or in a romantic relationship, of feeling, I feel alone in that intimate relationship with somebody. So again, it comes in all different shapes and forms. And therefore, to embrace it, the first step is to look inwards of where that loneliness might sit for you. Is there something that this loneliness gives rise to? Is there a longing, perhaps? Yeah, is there a longing for different kinds of relationships? Is there a longing to have more time with yourself because you feel like you're doing so much for other people? Is there a loneliness and a longing for carving out that space? Is there a longing to be more in community with others, to do more real things? Is there a longing to have a spiritual practice attached to a certain religion? It might be a spiritual practice. By that I mean to sing together with other people, to plant things into the earth with other people, to go on a walk in the forest alone or with other people, like a practice that can ground you in your life and in your community, in the world, and with life overall, that might relieve perhaps that sense of feeling alone in everything around us. So acknowledging loneliness as something that is unique and universal, and maybe moving closer to what it might be for you, and then seeing what it might give rise to, right? What is it that there's a longing behind that? And then perhaps seeing what might that be, how could I respond to this longing without the need to fix it immediately, right? Or resolve it and saying like, okay, these are the three things. Like, no. Like no need to do that. It is a longer process, and you're gradually moving towards it, like tiny steps. That's what I would say.
I think that's great to hear from someone like yourself, that it's healthy to be curious about it.
Yes,
and not to be scared, and to go towards it rather than go away from it is a good thing. And it can be incremental, just take those little steps towards it. I also think it's interesting what you said at the end about fixing it, because I find in my life when I've expressed it, and I've had times of deep loneliness, that people that I know will try and fix it. Oh, what if you do this? Go and join more clubs. Go and do more things. Go and meet more people. Go and reach out to people. Come around for coffee more. There's always these, like you said, do these three things and your life will be fine. And
you go on. You can go on. It's like go back to work. We have got work to do.
Yes. And it all comes from a good place, like no doubt, because people want the best for you, and they want to see what is contentment for you. And it's seen as almost a very negative thing. It's seen as something that can be almost like you put a plaster over it and it's gone. It's fine. It's not there. And there's something about that misunderstanding around it, and sort of sometimes the hearing from another person, rather than them encouraging to sit with it and explore it. And maybe they explore it with you, and maybe that shows up for them and they didn't even realize it was there, or it has been there, and as you said, they haven't been looking at it. Can be such an amazing exploration and such a nourishing thing that, again, I hope people listening to this really feel that they can take that on and do that. I call it work at times. I don't mean in terms of labor. I just mean attention and focus is drawn to it rather than drawn away from it. And then through that curiosity, as you said, they discover something about themselves, but also there's an acceptance and a recognition of what it could be that for them gives them some kind of sense of being with, which, as you could say, could be the planting in the soil, which is not something I've thought about actually. And I don't know, that's something I want to try now, is to see how that feels. I've done it on my own a lot, but not with others. But I love that idea of doing something with others that is connected to something else. So it's that holistic kind of experience.
Yeah.
And I think it's those things, if we can think about those and be aware of those, and like you've experienced, which you might want to talk about a little bit in terms of community building, such a rich soil, a rich environment to have those opportunities, because otherwise sometimes it can be quite difficult to make them grow, make them come to fruition.
Yes, it's absolutely. It's so much, like, it's such a simple thing to say, but it is so much easier to do things together than do them alone, on your own. There's almost this notion of hyper independence, right? It's like you do everything on your own. You go to this alone. If you have issues, please go along to your therapist, fix it, come back.
go drive on
You
your
do so
own,
many
everything.
things alone. And
Mm.
there's a distinction, no, between embracing your aloneness and what we talked about before of finding quiet, finding stillness just with yourself, which, by the way, could also be with other people doing that thing just for themselves. But there's a difference between that and then this hyper independence of suggesting that we ought to be so self-sufficient and not rely on other people.
Be strong.
And be strong, exactly.
And not need somebody, and not want somebody.
Exactly. Which are really like deep-seated beliefs that have kind of disconnected and driven us further apart from one another. So doing things together, you know, even saying like, yes, I want to work on my gardening skills or something like this. You know, let's do that together. Let's learn from one another. And let's meet each other, the 4 of us, the 5 of us, or whatever. Going to a community garden is so much easier. Right? Not even just in terms of motivation, but in terms of joy and right? And of doing something together and celebrating that, to your point, and being there and prioritizing that. But I think this is more and more needed of us coming together to do things together. Not because it serves, you know, a better outcome, because it's more efficient, because it's
we can grow more and sell more.
It's like no. It's because it's more joyful, you know, and it's because it's nourishing and it gives so much back. It just gives so much back to us. So why would we not do that? We give to each other, we give to ourselves, we receive and we give, and we are in touch with something outside of us.
So it's about the means rather than the end, which is, you know, what we already talked about in the capitalist commercial world. It's about the ends, not the means necessarily. So it's turning that on its head and going, let's look at the means with which we're doing that. And something else that struck me when you were speaking, it reminds us of that oneness, that sort of the need, the natural human need for that, and how that can evolve and what that can be. And to have that as an embedded or integrated part of our lives as well, that we do make time for, that we do value, we do spend time with and enjoy and explore and recognize and feel the positive feelings with, and something that can grow as well. And I think for so many reasons it's important, as you said, we prioritize that. And again, I hope people are inspired to do that from what we've said today and go forwards and do that. Because again, if people did that, the peoples of the world did that where they were, what a place we would all live in. An amazing, you know, rich place, environment we would live in, and how many opportunities we'd have with each other as well. Having spoken to so many people who, like yourselves, are doing such a beautiful work with others and for others, and I can highly recommend your gatherings. I've been to them and they were very nourishing and very rich experiences. What is your newest project? I call them a project of courage going forward. And how do you see that as fulfilling to you in particular?
Yes, I want to expand the conversations that I've been having and putting them more out. Like I want to make them, because so far the conversations that I've been having with people and the insights, they're here and there. And I would love to put them out in a way that more people can listen and to also see themselves, hopefully, in those stories, in those experiences, in those insights, perhaps. So I'm hoping to start writing a book. I'm planning to start a podcast, actually, in order to invite also other people in, and people who are working on this issue and who have different perspectives on this idea of loneliness, of oneness, of the idea of interconnectedness and interdependence, and to broaden really and enrich and hopefully that this moment that we're all trying to figure out what is happening and what is happening to us, what is happening to the world, and how can we move closer again to one another, which is not going to be something that's going to happen tomorrow or in the next 5 years, but it is a longer path, I think, that we're on. And I would love to contribute a small piece to that.
Heard it first here. Look out for your book in the future.
Yes.
I can't wait. I really can't wait. I mean, some of the things you said today, I thought those would make a beautiful part of a book. So I think it would be amazing for you to do that. And I'd really look forward to it. I really would. Based on your life experiences, which I know a little bit about, having met you a few times and attended your gatherings, you've had many experiences in your life. What has emerged for you that has given you this particular path at this particular moment in life, would you say?
Yeah, I wonder about that actually quite often. I'm like, yeah, what brought me here? And why does this work feel so, so intimately meaningful? Just something that I have to do, that I just have to do. And it is really not because I think I'm going to become, again, famous or known or going to make a lot of money, because I'm not. Right. And I know it's not with that approach. I'm not approaching it in this way. It's something that I don't have, and maybe I don't need a full answer to it. But what I do know is that I think I've always been very sensitive and attuned to people's feelings. I could always feel everything that is inside of me, but then also everything that is inside of other people a lot. I have a sense for that. I can sense that during my time with the House of Beautiful Business, which is a global community and platform where they're reimagining work and business towards a life-centered economy, bridging business and tech with the arts and humanities, helping to build that community and that platform and being in touch with a lot of people, I sensed that many of them carried this longing of to be seen, wanting to be heard, wanting to be in community and in relationship with other people, even though many of them on paper were very successful, probably have a very stable social support system and so forth. And yet there's something missing, or there was something missing. And I just became really curious what that is, because I felt it too, I think, personally. I also feel that. It's like, I am here building this incredible community and these amazing gatherings and experiences. And yet there is something in me that makes me feel lonely. So what is that?
Right.
And that was the beginning of wanting to understand what is that type of loneliness, what is behind that loneliness, and what does it have to do, as a personal experience, but also what is that on a systemic and structural level. There must be a relation.
Yes, must be a connection.
And then I think on an even more personal level for me, it has been that I've always been wondering about what home means to me. What is home, and what is that? I like it more than the sense of belonging. I think it's really home. What is home? And I have Chinese roots, but I grew up in Germany and spent my life in the West, in that sense, right, in Europe, with Western norms and ideals. Always felt to some part alienated and a little bit distant, and like there's something missing inside of me. And I've been sort of now on this path ever since I started this project as well, of also reconnecting and rerouting to who I am, where I'm from, and what home is, and how that is so related not only to my ancestors and to my lineage, but to something larger, to a much larger body and collective and culture that I'm keen to learn now, and also in some sense perhaps reclaim for myself, and even decolonize my own mind, decolonize my own patterns that I was unaware of, that I thought were normal. And for me, moving closer to that idea where in Eastern philosophy and viewing things, that there is an inherent interdependence. There's an inherent idea of impermanence. There's an inherent connection to all of life around us, right? I'm not saying modern societies now in Eastern Asia, for example, or China, if we want to pick that, are so holistic and like everybody is like in their oneness. Like, no, for sure not. But there is a rootedness
Yeah.
that comes with an ancient practice that is much more in touch with that than you could say for Western societies and cultures. So long-winded way to say there is, for me, I think in that process of rerouting and then also sensing and being in touch with others and having built community and relationships, all of those things I think have brought me to where I am right now, and perhaps why that feels so resonant with me, this work. Yeah.
It's interesting what you say about your roots and about exploring that, because I've been on a similar path myself. I was born in England and brought up to be very English, and I was discouraged from recognizing any of my heritage at all, to the point of negating it.
Yes.
Particularly my father's side, Scottish heritage, and my mum's side, Irish heritage. It was kind of mentioned, but because of the systemic racism and prejudice against Irish people, it wasn't encouraged. So I'd have loved to have done Scottish dancing, Irish dancing, Gaelic, done all these things from a very young age, but I wasn't encouraged or allowed to. So I did ballet. I did all the very English things. And it always felt not innate. It always felt imposed.
Yes.
And, even to speak in a very English way and to speak in a way that doesn't use any words that are from any other culture, but just English, has felt very strange as well. So I've been looking into and exploring what is it that I feel it's like there's a missing element to me, that when I go to those places, I feel I'm reconnected with very strongly, and it feels a part of me. And yet the people around me do not see that. So I went to Ireland, for example, and I wasn't encouraged to take part because I don't sound Irish. I don't dress in a particularly Irish way necessarily, or exhibit those Irish mannerisms. And that it's like being between two worlds. I feel really connected to this. And yet, because of how I am and how I've been raised, I don't fit into that. And yet my heart and my soul doesn't fit into what I appear as or what I sound like. And it's quite something to explore that area of yourself and to find what that is for you, what that can be, and how that can look for you. And I'm sure, like many listeners that are listening with us, there's elements of them that feel that too, for different ways and different reasons. And I think your points about the different almost philosophies, the different ways of being in the East and the West, so different. And there's an element of that as well for me culturally, just within the British Isles, of how English are very removed and detached, tend to be less emotional, very kind of professional, very high expectations things, but the Irish culture is much more relaxed. Laughter and embracing people and being and sharing, and there's no kind of, I give you this, you give me that. It's not transactional at all. It's purely about the loving experience. So luckily I had that element of that part of things. It's interesting how you feel, as you're saying, you're drawn to certain things that feel innate to you and part of you. And then how is that going to be sustained with you, and how's that going to flourish, and how can that coexist with where you find yourself as a human being? I think that's a really important and interesting space to be exploring and to be within. I thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing as well.
So we're coming to the end of a wonderful, really, I feel it's been nourishing to me, our conversation and what we've discussed. When I first met you, it was through the Oneness and through the gatherings. And I just felt, to me, you embodied it. There was like no separation, no disconnection, no kind of, I'm doing this because I think this is what I should be doing. It just was you. And there was such an effortlessness about it, and such an ease, but also such a presence and attention that I thought, gosh, this is pretty unique to come across. So I'm so glad to hear that this is what you will continue with, and this is what feels right for you and gives you richness. Because as someone who participated, I definitely felt that, and I know other people did as well in the group that I was in.
It's so much
a pleasure. I think, as you said, having that genuine awareness of other people, I can say it from a place of truth as well, and share that with the listeners here too. Today, there have been so many things that I could talk about and what we've said and how we said it. I think the looking left to right, I'd like that as something to be in people's awareness, because I think it's such a simple phrase to remember, but such a key and important thing that we can all do with each other to develop that sense of oneness, which is what we need. I'm definitely going forwards with more technology and more robotics and more AI. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but in terms of relationality, there could be some things that will not encourage that and foster that as much. So the time is now. I think also your ideas about quietness and stillness and carving out that time, making that time for ourselves without any judgment from ourselves or others, is an important part and should be part of us. And I hope it encourages people to do that and have that presence of mind, the prioritization. And your sense of community and sense of global belongingness and that home. I've kind of played with that. I'm not sure where I'm at with it. Belonging, home, I haven't quite resolved it in myself, but I understand what you're saying, where you're going with it. And I'd encourage other people to think about that as well. What does it mean for them? And where do they place themselves? And how, when they place themselves, does it form part of a oneness? How does it form part of a oneness within their immediate people they're with, within their community, and then within the world themselves? And I think what we said today is how you really actively participate in that for yourself, relationally with others, and then with the world. And having that not only in awareness, but doing something with that. Once we know, what can we actually do? And you've mentioned what you've developed, which people can look up and have a look at and maybe get involved with as well. And maybe others will be inspired to create something themselves as well, but always share it with us going forward. It'd be lovely to hear, wouldn't it? I've done this now, and wow, that's amazing. And I think not being judgmental or scared or running away from loneliness, the flip side from oneness, in effect. We feel it, we sense it, and perhaps, as you said, with yourself and myself to an extent, we feel it with others. We let it be, and then we think about where's it coming from, and then going forwards, how can we maybe coexist with it, but address it in a way, or seek to embrace it? How can, and what does that look like? So those are my key takeaway points. I know there's a lot we've gone through, so I'm sure people listening will have it even more, but those are my key ones. I'd invite you, if you'd like to say a final comment, I'm more than welcome for you to, but there's no expectation at all. So that's up to you.
I hope that this conversation also sparks maybe curiosity to bring loneliness, as a topic to the next chat that you have with a friend or in a group, or just to spark it, and to say like, I listened to this podcast and they were talking about loneliness and how what, I was wondering if you have any thoughts or feeling, just spark it. And I think that can already open something that might be really unexpected. So to the point of not shying away and doing something small to help yourself and others in that sense, right? So we help each other by making it visible, perhaps.
Yes, it's almost like things that have been almost taboo subjects.
Yes.
Over time, it's almost into that category. Really, by raising our ability or engaging with the ability to talk about it openly, means that we recognize it exists in society, and we can start to embrace it as a society based on our ability to embrace it as an individual and support each other with that. Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
Really would. Yeah. And thank you so much for your time today, Monica.
Thank you. Yeah.
It has been a joy, and it has been, so for me, very soulful experience. I look forward to another one in future, and I look forward to your book and hearing how that develops and how it goes as well as everything else I know you're involved with. I really value your time, and I really hope this podcast has a lot of benefits for other people that they can carry and share forwards, and they can get in contact with you or I and let us know the impact it's had as well, and what they're doing as a result.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate spending time and being together here.
Yeah, my pleasure.